treaty will only focus on humanitarian response, on civic action, on counterterrorism, aspects that are not connected with mutual defense, because these are not external threat aspects. Humanitarian response in case of a typhoon, for example, is not addressed towards a security threat. The Mutual Defense Treaty provides the following. External armed attack. It is about external armed attack. So if you remove the two exercises, this is the FIBLEX and the CARAT. CARAT is about naval exercises, addressing a threat from the sea. FIBLEX is about amphibious exercises, addressed to the possibility of retaking an island taken over by a hostile force. So that is going to be removed, and that will weaken the very meaning of mutual defense. The Mutual Defense Treaty that we forged in 1951 will become almost meaningless, because there will be no exercises to sharpen our capability under the Mutual Defense Treaty. And these are the articles that I mentioned here, to set aside. And then another very strong statement that came out only the other day, that the Philippines is going to temporarily set aside the sea row with China. In other words, set aside the ruling of the arbitral tribunal, and we will focus on developing our relation with China as far as fishing is concerned in Scarborough Shoal. And they mentioned that China is going to help us in the culturing of fishes that will sustain the families and livelihood of the fishermen in the Zambales, Pangasinan area. My response to this is this: we do not need the technical assistance of China in this area. I think we're even more competent than China in culturing fish, because we have SeaTech, the Southeast Asia Fisheries Development Corporation, based in Iloilo, that has been there for decades. We have a number of mariculture projects all over the islands. We are, I think, even far ahead of China as far as culturing of fish is concerned. We don't need help from them in that area. And very sadly, Secretary Rasay said that we're going to temporarily set aside our conflicting territorial claims with China. My worry here is that when he says temporarily, how long is temporary? Will it be a few months? Will it be 1 year? Because if it becomes temporary for quite a long time, people might construe this as we're starting to lose our interest in the ruling of the arbitral tribunal. We're starting to lose our interest in asserting our claim as far as the West Philippine Sea is concerned. And again, the President said that we're going to align our foreign policy with the China-led Asian development. Of course, this has not been clarified yet, and I'm very sure that this is going to go through a lot of debate, hopefully in the Cabinet, in Congress, in NEDA. Now, one of the pet peeves of the President, and I can understand this, is that the U.S. is treating us like a junior partner, that we're not being treated fairly. But then I pose the question, do we expect China to treat us like an equal partner? Here's a statement of foreign policy from no less than a former foreign minister of China, Jaycee, now still very powerful state councilor of the People's Republic of China, and considered one of the most prominent architects of China's foreign policy. What did he say in July 2020 in Vietnam during the ASEAN Foreign Ministers Conference in Hanoi? He said, and this is well quoted, China is a big country and other countries are small countries, and that is just a fact. So how can we expect equal treatment from a country whose former foreign minister and state councilor talks like this? And of course, that is a fact. We cannot deny that. We can apply this to the U.S. also. The U.S. is a big country, Some are small countries, and that is a fact. The Philippine leader, hopeful of new world order under Russia and China. Here, I think maybe he was just joking here, because he said that we would quit the UN and join China and Russia if they set up something like another league. Because I'm a little worried if that becomes true. I don't want to belong to a league consisting of China, Russia, North Korea, etc., etc. I would rather be with the United States, with Japan, with Australia, with New Zealand, with Western Europe. I don't know about you guys. But of course, there's a big game changer now. This is the Trump factor. The President congratulated, a very good diplomatic move, congratulated incoming President Donald Trump and said that he looks forward to working with the incoming administration for enhanced Philippine-U.S. relations. Enhanced Philippine-U.S. relations, which is, to me, not in full consonance with the earlier statements of a foreign policy that will be drifting away from the United States. Of course, with the caveat, mutual respect, mutual benefit, and shared commitment to democratic ideals and the rule of law. But here again, if we speak of democratic ideals and the rule of law, how can we reconcile this statement with China and Russia? Because definitely they do not subscribe to the same democratic ideals and the rule of law that the Philippines subscribes to. Trump advisor says U.S. will continue to keep China in check. And this is, I'm quoting here James Woolsey, who said that the U.S. itself is the holder of the balance of power in Asia and likely to remain quite determined to protect its allies against China's overreach. Because they cited Beijing has moved to cement its claim to most of the South China Sea, building of artificial islands, etc., etc. This is in contradiction to Trump's isolationist foreign policy as declared earlier. Because during the election campaign, Trump in April said, China's building of man-made islands in the disputed waters was a sign of Beijing's disrespect for America. We have to study this, it has a deep meaning. In other words, they consider the artificial islands, although that is not part of the United States, as a sign of disrespect for America, because that is one way of pushing them out. They know that it is an act that is aimed at eventually pushing out America from the South China Sea. There's an expectation that China and Russia will try to test Trump's mettle very early with some economic plans. This is what is worrying me. We don't know whether it's going to be good or bad, because I think you're all aware that Trump has said that he's going to launch a trade war with China. And this is what some people have looked at. How is this looked at? China's export to the U.S. is worth $483 billion last year. China's export to the U.S., America's export to China is $116 billion only. So in a trade war, China is likely to lose here. But if China loses, how will it affect us? Because many components of China's products include components coming from the Philippines. On the other hand, if the U.S. will look for other markets, because they cannot immediately adjust to, let's say, if they, for example, refuse to export, to import from China, they cannot immediately start their manufacturing facilities there for these substitutes. And they will most likely look for other markets where some products, where the products will come from. And that will be Vietnam, the Philippines. So that is a plus factor for the Philippines in that kind of a trade war. So this is something to look at. You know, China's exports in 2015 was processing trade In other words, they process components, many of them coming from other countries, and many of them coming from the Philippines. For example, many of us are using iPhone. About 700 parts are needed to assemble the iPhone. About 500 are made in China. All the others are made outside, including about 23 parts made in the Philippines. So if that is going to be hit, how will that affect the Philippines? Positively or negatively? So that is what I call America's trade cavalry, to start a trade war with China that will result in a huge drop in U.S. imports from China, now at around $480 billion. Trade protectionism. And then the Trump on Asia. They've been looking at the South China Sea. President Trump, in spite of his isolationist statements, are still looking at the South China Sea. Trump is opposed to China's territorial ambitions. His running mate, Mike Pence, the vice president elect, they would like to bring an end to the kind of posture in the world that has the Chinese building new islands in the South China Sea. So they're addressing, from their statement, they're going to address the construction of the Chinese in the South China Sea. But of course, there's another conflicting analysis that under Donald Trump, the U.S. will accept China's rise as long as it doesn't challenge the status quo. And what is the status quo? The U.S. remains the hegemon. The U.S. will have control in the West Pacific area, including the South China Sea. So I consider that as a clear message that the U.S. will continue to be the leading military force in the world. And I expect that the rules of the game will be changed because the Pacific Command has been very hot on the South China Sea. But the only reason why the Pacific Command cannot go more robustly in the South China Sea is because of the more peace-oriented policy of outgoing President Obama. But that is going to change. It will have an effect on India, it will have an effect on so many other things. So that basically is, I can talk more about the military might comparison, but that's going to take another 30 or 45 minutes. I know that my time here is limited, but I just would like to say that what we are witnessing now is a convergence of very powerful military forces of the world, a new arms race. A lot of that focus in the Indo-Pacific areas. The powers in the region that are converging right now are much bigger than the powers that we are witnessing in the Middle East, in Europe, in NATO, because all the big boys are here, like the United States with their big Navy and Air Force, China with their big Navy and growing Air Force as well. There's Japan, which is increasing their budget. The budget is now more than $50 billion for next year, and they have very modern Navy, a lot of very modern submarines, and a lot of big Air Force. Vietnam just acquired 6-kilo class submarines, and here are the comparison. Australia is there, India is there, Pakistan is there, and many other powers are there. So I'd like to end my presentation here by saying that the next few weeks, the next few months are going to be very decisive as far as what's happening in this part of the world is concerned. The South China Sea, the Indo-Pacific area, the clash, the superpower clash between the United States and China. There is the so-called Thucydides trap, much discussed by military strategists, by geopolitical strategists. What is the Thucydides trap? It says that there's a hegemon, and then there's a rising power. When the hegemon sees that there's a rising power, what it will try to do is to neutralize the rising power. On the other hand, the rising power will attempt to challenge the hegemon. And of course, in the end, it will result in a physical conflict between the two. That is the Thucydides trap, and let's all pray that it will not happen here in this part of the world. Maraming salamat. Thank you so much.